Hello, and welcome to the Mentor Dino podcast. I'm your host, Caitlin Rosier. I am an architect and founder of Mentor Dino. Join me each week as I speak with amazing professionals in and around the architecture, engineering, and construction industry, as we are all part of a larger interconnected community. We discuss everything from career stories, lessons learned, and advice for others finding their own unique career path. Thank you to all of our current subscribers, and if you're new, welcome to the conversation. And if you like this episode, please do me a favor by hitting subscribe, like, or share it with a friend. It really helps others be able to discover this resource and support them on their own unique career journey. On today's episode of the Mentor Dino podcast, I would like to welcome Julianne Peters, interior designer, architect in training, adjunct professor, and founder of the Design Success Network out in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So thank you, Julianne, for taking the time to speak with me today.
Thank you for having me. I am the girl that does too much.
I was going to say it's probably the most mouthful I've had to do for an introduction. So I'm glad my first question, I always ask my guests to introduce themselves and letting my audience know a little about your experience and journey so far in your education and career so they can learn a little bit what I already know. So take it away.
So I have an undergraduate degree in interior design, and I do have my NCIDQ certification, but I'm also currently in a Master of Architecture program, and I'm accruing my hours for my architecture license. When I was in grade school, I was getting in trouble for just drawing constantly. But when my mother looked at what I was drawing, it was house plans or school floor plans, or I was drawing maps, but not just like a map of a town, but here's the map of the town. And then I would highlight the bus routes. Like I was really thinking spatially at such an in-depth level and getting in trouble for being distracted doing that, that my mom was like, what is this? And how can she do it for a living? And luckily we found architecture. Graduating high school in 2008, into the recession, made me rethink that a little bit because my 17-year-old brain said, no one's going to build buildings ever again. So that's when I found interior design and fell in love with the human experience within buildings. But I also have just a passion for our industry in all of its forms and also design education. So I wanted to go back for my master's. I'm about halfway through that program.
Yeah, so did you just, for discovering interior design, I know for some interior designers, it's like what you see on HGTV, and then you got to like break that mold on that's not what interior design is. So how did you find that shifting from architecture to interior design in that research?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had applied to colleges that were for architecture. I applied to architecture programs. And, again, 2008, housing recession, one of the programs had accepted me into both interior design and architecture and said, you can choose. And that made me really investigate, what is this other thing? Again, 2008, thinking about rehabbing existing buildings as opposed to building new. I did not come from a family that had architects within it. My father's an electrical engineer by schooling, a project manager in practice. I was very programmatically and technically minded, but didn't really fully understand the potential of our industry, especially because HGTV, a lot of it is decoration or construction and real estate. Very little of it at the time, again, early 2000s, was actually interior design. And as an interior designer, I'm not a good decorator. I did pick Sherwin-Williams Roycroft bottle green for this room, but the rest of my house, my girlfriend picked everything. I physically built the walls. I designed the millwork and built it myself, but she picked the wallpaper, the furniture, those kinds of things. And it was really through my education. I went to Philadelphia University, now Jefferson, where I really discovered that I can do just the technical things. I can be a planner. I can be a really good detailer and drafter and project manager. And that those were the parts that I was really drawn to that also encompass both architecture and interior design. As an interior designer, I'm sort of on a lifelong crusade to explain to people that I don't do pillows and paint colors. I can, but it's not my forte and it's not what I like. And a lot of people, there's just a misconception about what our industry is. A part of that is because of the history of the industry, which I can get into if you want me to, and the lack of recognition in terms of licensing. So, working in interior design, there's a little bit of advocacy that I get to do every day by explaining to people, like, when you're in a space and it's uncomfortable, maybe it needed an interior designer. If you're in a
Mhm.
space and it's working really well, whether that be a grocery store, a hospital, or someone's home, I bet you there was an interior designer behind it.
Yeah, because I always try to explain architecture and interior design as the human side of construction
Yeah.
and how people move and interact with the space, and it's just different scales. So like an urban planner is really that urban scale and city planning of people movement,
Yeah.
then architects are people movement throughout the space, and it starts to then blend into interior design that some
Yeah.
designers like that bigger scale and some like the more finite on how materials move and how you experience materials, but then how you physically operate and move. And so it becomes
Yeah.
ergonomic based. You know, when
Yeah.
you go into, I hate saying a bathroom because that's half architecture anyway. You guys don't just design bathrooms, but if you can go into a bathroom and when it feels uncomfortable or things aren't at the right reaching moments and spots, that
Mm-hmm.
is probably because an architect or interior designer was not involved because so many, it's about spatial placement and how
Yeah.
you fit into a seat where things are, how things flow. And it's so much more than just, hey, here's the paint color and we flip this
Absolutely.
house and put a new
Yeah. I
blanket
think
down.
a lot of people don't, even some people within our profession, don't understand that architecture and interior design is a Venn diagram, that there's
Hmm.
a lot of crossover in the middle. And then decorators are over here in a Venn diagram with interior designers. So it's like one of those three circle Venn diagrams. I've done some NCIDQ prep classes where there are architects in attendance, and they're like, "Oh, I had that kind of a question on my exam." I'm like, "Yes, Venn diagram. Like, we both have to understand building code. We both care about, the life safety, health, safety, and welfare. That's it. We both care
Yeah.
about health, safety, and welfare, and there's that overlap between our professions. We just have our specialties. And it
Hmm.
doesn't mean that we can't cross collaborate or even dabble a little bit in both, which I'm definitely proof of, proof of that concept. Um, but, there should also be respect for those specialties.
Yeah. I know every project I'm asking the interior designers on the project, hey, what do you enjoy doing? What do you have a passion for? What do you want to Um, is there anything you want to stretch and do, or do you not have bandwidth to handle this project and you just want to keep light touch? Because some
Yeah.
designers want to do all the casework details and go through the custom millwork, and other ones are like, whoa, that's not my forte. And so I always have to ask my interior designers, what do you want to do? What's your skill set until I learn them? Because it's such a unique niche and everybody can have such varying
Yeah.
skills, passions, and priorities with it. So,
And it's the same with architecture. Some people really love rendering and the proposal and that kind of schematic phase. Other architects really want to be a project architect and want to, oversee all of the construction documents. Some want to project manage. Like, that is the beauty of our education and the opportunities we have, even just within the firm. Like, we're only talking
mhm.
about the career opportunities within a firm. If you even expand outside of that within sales and education and software, like, it's really endless.
Yeah, I know when I was looking at architecture programs, I talked to a dean and said, I really want to dual major in architecture and interior design because I'm like, these two talk to each other so much. I don't want to
And let me
have to
guess,
pick one.
they told you not to do it, right?
They
Because
told
that's what
me it was
most do.
impossible, but they also
Yeah.
told me that I wouldn't make it as an architect either. So
Mm-mm-mm.
that's how people end up not in our industry before they even get into architecture
Yeah,
school.
yeah,
And I wish I had better education on, you had to pick one program or the other, but theoretically, I can sit for my NCIDQ as an
yeah,
architect. Like that dean, if they had the education for the different processes, likely he only had education on the
yeah,
architecture process. But if he understood how these can come together. It's, hey, you can either go for your interior design degree and then go for your master's in architecture to be able to do both, like your path. Or you could go for your architecture degree. You could probably take some minor classes in interior design, color theory, and stuff to have a well-rounded education, but they could sit for your NCIDQ too.
Yeah.
So it's education I didn't realize until further into my career that are opportunities that
Yeah.
I wish somebody would have explained to me as a high school student
Yeah.
exploring.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so how's the process with architecture school being now that you've been in practice and going back for your master's?
Yeah, so I graduated 10 years ago with my degree in interior design and have had the good fortune of working for firms who identified that, if you can detail an interior wall, you can learn how to detail an exterior wall. So I've had opportunities to sort of do the architecture tasks that a lot of people define as being separate from interior design. So going into actually wanting to get my master's, I'm really focusing on getting practical technical education because I feel like I've had experience with project management, a lot of the soft skills. I've been working for 10 years. I'm entrenched in the firm world. And what I need is that credential and then to get my license. I'm about halfway through collecting my AXP hours because even as an interior designer, again, a lot of our tasks overlap. So the hours that I was accruing, I was project managing and I was the one signing the AIA contracts as the representative of my firm, even though my title was interior designer. That still counts towards my AXP experience hours. So I'm about halfway through my grad program in terms of credits. I'm planning on graduating in 2027, and I'm about halfway through my AXP hours, accruing those. It's been really interesting to see, as some interior designers joke, stepping into the dark side. Coming from interior design as a background, it's a much younger profession. It's only a little bit over a century old compared to architecture, which is centuries old. Interior design is also puts women at the front. It's an industry that was founded by women and is mostly women. So when I go to, look at AIA events and there are specific women in architecture groups, that doesn't exist within interior design because we are at the front and are supporting one another. So it's been interesting in that way to see just the cultural differences. And then in terms of the education, I got a CETA accredited degree, which is the NAB NCARB, excuse me, for interior design. Or is it NAB? No,
It's
it's
NAB.
NAB. Okay. I got a CETA accredited degree, which is the NAB for interior design. And now I'm getting a NAB accredited Master of Architecture degree. So, in a sense, the structure is very much the same. I have semester long studios, I have my support classes outside of that, theory, building technology, visualizations, very similar to what I did in undergrad. I made sure to shop around to find a master's program that would recognize my undergrad experience and my credentials. So, Arizona State University actually accepted me at the same level as someone who would have like a BS in architecture or an unaccredited architecture degree. And a lot of it's interesting. One of my first studios, I met with one of my professors, and I was like, I have to choose what kind of structure I want to use for my building. And I understand the different options, I understand their characteristics, but I don't yet understand the why. Like, I know what mass timber is going to offer me versus, steel and concrete, but I just haven't been used to making this kind of decision in a project yet because I haven't had the opportunity to influence these kinds of building systems. And it was like sort of the first big hurdle that I had to cross over mentally to, get into the architecture role. But so much of it is similar because design school teaches you how to think. And now I'm
Mm-hmm.
just applying that thinking to the core, the shell, that kind of stuff. Uh, the other big difference in what I'm experiencing now is the program I'm doing is completely online and asynchronous. Again, fully NAB accredited. It's a 2-year program, what I was accepted into. If you do it full time, and it's rigorous for sure, but the atmosphere of studio culture is you have to be so much more intentional about it online. You can't just bump into someone on a late night in studio who's sitting at their desk and, talk about things. You can't just drop in on your professor in their office. So it's been interesting. It's asynchronous, so any class that is scheduled is actually recorded and you don't have to be there per attendance. I like to be there because we're building community,
Mm-hmm.
studio culture. um, and I actually joined the studio culture committee because post 2020 ASU has, noticed that even in person there's just been a shift because of how virtual our world was for a couple years, and a lot of the, you know 18, 19 something undergrads coming into school, were virtual in high school or in middle school, and how that's affected how we collaborate. So Arizona State has been really intentional about coming up with a manifesto for faculty, staff, and students online and in person to agree to. But I think the biggest thing for me is that I've had to do the extra work to reach out to my colleagues, to my classmates, and identify the ones who within my cohort are, the people that I can have that studio culture with. There are people who are, like me, who are in the middle of their careers looking for something different. There are people who are fresh out of undergrad. There are people all over the country. So really finding like who are my colleagues in this situation that I can, text when I'm having a Revit issue and I'm working on my project, or when we don't understand, one of the concepts we're studying in my architectural theory class. So yeah, the online atmosphere has been interesting, but also as someone who's working in education now, it's given me the experience on this side of the desk to be able to teach better in that setting. I hope.
Maybe. Because I don't think virtual is going to go away.
No.
I remember when I was in school, I think one of my semesters, I decided to like we had desktops because that's what could handle Revit at the
Yep.
time. Like I am rendering and letting it sit. I can't work on it while it's
Oh my gosh.
rendering.
Yeah, for
And
hours.
so it's wherever you set up your desktop. So it was a little bit more permanent on where you set up your home. And it's, do you want your home to be in studio or do you want your home to be at home? And for one semester I tried being at home, and or at least like my apartment at school, and
Yeah.
it was fine, but you miss that connection. So then when you are in studio, it's really trying to like grab people and make sure that you talk to them, but you didn't have that stumble upon experience or seeing what
Yeah.
other people are working on at the time. And I don't think that's going to go away with practice as much as I advocate, go into studio and work there or go into the office to work there just so you can get your bearings to build that
Yeah.
initial cohort or culture community within the firm, so you can pick up the phone and call somebody. Or I
Yeah.
have somebody that we're in completely different cities and we'll both work at the same time, and we'll have like a 2-hour call just like talking to
Yes.
each other, but
Yes.
we're drafting and working at the same time just like we would be sitting next to each other in an office, and we call
Yeah.
it our like fun focus time because I could block off focus time and nobody could call me. So instead, we have our fun focus
Our
time
own
where,
call. Yeah.
we can call, we can rant, we'll even be on different projects and like
Yeah.
I'll go off on something or you hit a design challenge and they're not on the job, but you can get a fresh set of eyes on it. And it's about intentionally building those cultures. And
Absolutely.
if you don't, and you're just going to think things are going to happen, then the culture's
Yeah.
not going to create itself the way it used to.
Yeah.
And that
I
can make it
think
hard.
for the future of just well-being, having hybrid options for work is incredible. I love being able to work from home on a Monday and do my laundry then instead of having to do it on the weekend, especially if I was traveling or something. But making the office a destination for collaboration, I've done workplace design for most of my career, and especially through the hybrid change and, remote work, making the workplace a destination for collaboration. You want to be there to see your colleagues. It's a
Exactly.
place that's exciting. It's a place that, especially in our profession, you need to sometimes physically draw things out together or look at material samples together. And, even though I can get those samples sent to my house, it's not the same thing.
Yeah, and sometimes it's easier just to walk somebody through something, whether it's hand drawing or sharing a screen and pointing, and not have to like physically share a screen and see a face, but be next to somebody and walk them through it. Or if they're doing an intense task all day, sometimes it's nice like, hey, let me just sit next to you, and as I get in and out of meetings, I want to check in. But at least we
Yeah.
know we're both there that day and that's the
Yeah.
main task at hand and why.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, It's interesting to see how it shifts across generations too, with, being a millennial slightly on the older side. I grew up with AOL Instant Messenger and am not afraid to slide into someone's DMs, especially on LinkedIn. I slide into everyone's DMs on LinkedIn. I think that's how we got connected.
Yep.
But it's interesting with, folks who might be a little bit more comfortable with a phone call, or folks who think that sending a GIF in a Teams message is unprofessional. There's also some, I think, balance that has to come in our work culture eventually. But
yeah, I feel like if they think that's unprofessional, they wouldn't work well with me. I'm like, if you're not having fun and laughing on a project, it's going to be hard, because there's going to be stressful times and people are going to make mistakes. But like, if
Yeah.
you're not celebrating and putting in fun, like photos or pictures or just something to make somebody laugh throughout the day,
Yeah.
you got to have, I don't know, some fun somewhere. You can't be serious all the time.
Absolutely.
But switching over to work culture and your work experience side, I know you've gone through 2 layoffs recently, and we're definitely in a time. It's not 2008 recession where there's no jobs available, but there are a lot of firms taking some big hits depending
Yeah.
on what types of projects you're on. People are a lot more cognizant on money coming in, if clients are continuing their projects going on hold, tariffs coming in. So I want to talk about your 2 layoffs that you've had recently and your experience with those.
Yeah. So I was laid off twice within the course of 14, 16 months, a little over a year. And both times I was, adamant, I love this industry. The first time it had happened right after I put my deposit down for grad school. And it was scary. I had never not worked since I was 16, or, the legal age of being able to work, since I was bagging groceries. I've always had a job. It was really shocking. So my first layoff, I had worked at a small firm for 9 years. I was an associate, and the way the firm was structured was that it was the partners who owned the firm. I was one of 3 associates, and then there was the rest of the team. So very simple hierarchy. It was an incredible place to learn. You know, because it was a small firm, I was able to get my hand in every single phase. It's where I got a lot of my project management experience, and I felt so supported in terms of professional development. I also worked a true 9 to 5. Like, they were very adamant. If you can't get this work done in 40 hours a week, it either means you need more support or we're mismanaging your time. And that, as like a fresh out of college job, was incredible. It really helped me. I was able to learn how to use my voice in this safe environment. And I was also able to build their team. I became the hiring manager because I love networking. I like making friends, especially in our industry. And at the time that I was laid off, other than the other associates and the firm owners, I had hired the other about 8 to 10 people who were there. That company specialized in corporate workplace, and they only had clients on master service agreements. So a limited number of clients in a very specialized sector that was being hit pretty hard post 2020. So when my client was rethinking their real estate strategy indefinitely, that unfortunately ended up being time for me to go. I think in hindsight, I also realized I had gotten a bit complacent. I was very comfortable there and maybe wasn't challenging myself as much anymore. I'm not a woo-woo person, but the universe was sending me signals, and I'm aggressively optimistic. So I was just like, we're going to work with this. My business coach says I'm not a woo-woo person. I'm a woohoo kind of person. And I said, Elizabeth, you are right.
Yeah. And I found a lot of architects, especially that first job, if it's not toxic and it's manageable, whether, it's workload or anything, a lot of architects get comfortable
Yeah.
and are afraid to jump around to different firms. Not advocating for everybody to jump like every year, because you'll never actually learn what you need.
Yeah.
But a lot of professionals get comfortable, but then they get frustrated in certain avenues, but then they don't want to leave
Yeah.
because they
Yeah.
overall enjoy it.
Yeah. I was very happy there. The firm was owned by an architect and an interior designer. They both had ownership. They both had their credentials, and they supported all of us on the same equal footing that they saw each other. Also, as being a woman, the company was owned by a man and by a woman. And, I was going out on site by myself. I would come back and say, like, hey, this contractor did this thing that was uncomfortable. And they would say, got it. What's that group's name? We're not going to recommend them again. Like I had their full support. And early on in my career, having that opportunity at a small firm where I was able to do so much, but also be supported in doing all of that, I think was a wildly unique experience. I think that a lot of firms don't necessarily support professional development, or they talk the talk but don't walk the walk. And I am so much of who I am today is because of those experiences I had at a small firm. So after I got laid off, I was laid off on a Friday. And, I took the weekend, came back in, cleared out my desk, all of that stuff. And then that Monday I said, all right, I've been in the industry for 9 years. I was heavily involved in the International Interior Design Association in my city in Philly, but also in the region. I was chapter president. So I had kind of heard all the good, the bad, the ugly about a lot of the other firms that I didn't work at. And from that, I knew, I have college classmates and IIDA colleagues who have worked at this large firm in the city for, as long as I had been at my place. And they also felt supported there. The company culture seemed really good in terms of recognition, support, opportunity. So that Monday, that was the email I sent. I said, hey, I know you're not hiring, but that's where I want to be. If there's any chance that you can bring me in for an interview, I would love to talk. Now, the backstory to that is I'd interviewed there twice before. Once when I was coming out of college, and my college roommate and best friend got the job and I didn't. She was one of the people that I emailed. And then a couple years after that, they had asked me to come in for an interview, but I wasn't quite ready to leave the small firm where I was. So when I emailed them asking for the third interview that I would have there, they luckily said yes, and they brought me in. I was still applying elsewhere. I don't want to put all my eggs in one basket. I had some recruiters that I had good relationships with, as well as, again, through IIDA and just networking. It was all personal relationships that was getting me opportunities for interviews. But when I went into this large firm and they sent me an offer, it was either the end of that week or the next week, I said, that's where I want to be. Like, if I'm at the level in my career now where, I'm 9 to 10 years into it, and I'm going to advocate for what I want. I was going to wait to make sure I could find the right job, not try to rush into something. The small firm was very gracious in giving me a good severance. They took care of me very well in that respect. So when I got that offer, I said, yes, absolutely. I said, I'm still going to take some time off because I was afforded that. And I had never taken time off since I was a teenager. So I said, I need a little bit of a break. But then I accepted that offer and started there that June. While I was taking my break, I tried to be not on a computer as much as possible. I did some freelance carpentry work. I built a deck. I did some fencing. I just tried to still, again, stay within thinking about building and making, but off a computer. So yeah, then
building therapy.
Yes, exactly. Lots of hammer throwing. So then I joined this large firm, which was a vastly different experience. They, at the time, had over 30,000 employees internationally. Now they've done a lot more acquisitions, and I'm sure that number has maybe even doubled. I'm not sure, but there's a lot of people. Within my office here in Philly, there was like 200 of us. So going from a team of like 12 to 200, it was sort of overwhelming. Like I knew a lot of the architects and interior designers already because of my networking, but I was still meeting new people every day, and also getting used to a whole new set of standards and, just the internal software and all of that stuff. And also just trying to find my place. I came from a small firm where it was like there were 3 steps on the ladder. And here I'm like, there are all these different pathways and PDFs that explain those pathways. And it was quite overwhelming at first. But I tried to align myself with, individuals who I thought could mentor me in my career, but then also within that political system, for lack of a better word. It's kind of like the office politics of, I was trying to figure out, okay, now that I'm at a big company, my supervisor doesn't actually work with me. So how do I find out who can actually mentor me if she doesn't do that? it turns out our year-end review was actually goal setting, and all of the promotions and salary raises were done like a month before that. So how do I advocate for myself at that table? Whereas at the small firm, the people who were making those decisions, I talked to and worked with every single day. So it took me a little while to find my footing. I also was coming into it, a large company that worked in a lot of different sectors. I said, listen, I have a decade's worth of workplace experience. I'm willing to do that, but I want to try everything else. I said, I want to try healthcare because that feels like job security. That's a ominous comment for later. That feels like job security. I really want to try education design because when I first interviewed at that firm 10 years ago, that's what I wanted to do. And then I also said, please let me try transit because I found out they had a civic and transit team. I don't own a car. I'm a bus, train, and bicycle kind of girly. And I was so excited about that. So I started in education and was really enjoying it. I felt like the principals who were running that studio, again, the mentorship there was just so strong. She was like, absolutely, I'm going to sign off on your AXP hours. This is going to be great. And then within the first couple months I was there, two of the four principals, the two that were sitting in my office, because it's a greater business center, as they call it. So staffing is across multiple offices, but the two principals who were in my office left the firm. So I was kind of looking around at the education studio and I was like, okay, there's no one who's going to advocate for me at those conversations about money and promotions. There's no one in this studio who, there are other people who would be mentors, but closer at the peer level, not necessarily the principal level.
Yeah. And I think more the aspect of local to you is also important for that aspect too. Because you would have been given a principal studio leader, but they could have been in a whole different city, which makes
in a
it
different
harder.
State, in a different state, multiple states away. And I also felt like I know who I am. I know what I want. I know what I deserve. And I was like, I don't want to have to prove myself over and over again to people who don't actually see me physically every day. So I said, all right, let's try healthcare. I was still trying to get into transit as like my end goal because again, I just wanted to work on train stations so bad. So I was, doing a couple projects there, but I got thrown into the healthcare studio and I got assigned to a project where they were like, I said to the entire team, I have no healthcare experience, none. I have lots of experience across every phase of a project, but like, I don't know FGI. I don't know. I'm also, knock on wood, a relatively healthy person. So I rarely go to a hospital. Like I don't even have the end user experience that some people might have. But again, I thought it would be job security, boom, boom, boom. So I was like, let me try it. And I was brought onto this team to help on a ground up medical outpatient building. And I was really excited about it. It involved so many different modalities from imaging to outpatient surgery to rehab to urgent care to primary care that I was like, I get to learn everything. And they gave me my first task was investigating codes. And I really dug into it and, was working really hard, being in good communication. But another one of the tasks that they told me when I was brought onto this team was there's an entry-level designer who's not really showing up in terms of being a team player. And they asked me to bring her up to speed in terms of those soft skills. And I feel very confident that that is something I can do. But this individual was just really checked out. So I was kind of set up for failure by you have to be an expert on this thing that you don't know anything about in order to bring this person up to speed and get them to buy into what they're doing. And also the team is heavily stacked with tons of people and who all know what they're doing, and no one really had time to answer my questions. And I think, by the time I was reaching the end of DDs on this project, I was just like, listen, I am picking up the red lines. I'm spending extra time outside of work trying to learn as much as I can, but it just wasn't as supportive of an atmosphere as I had found in the other studio within this office. So I had some conversations with my supervisor, who again was someone I had never actually worked with, and also with that project team and with the civic and transit team, because I was just like, listen, I hear that the civic and transit team only has one interior designer. I'm an interior designer. I have my certification. So for your federal projects, I've got the letters after my name that you need. I also have the passion to want to do this because a lot of interior designers, they want to do the healthcare, the education, the workplace. Transit doesn't necessarily come across as flashy and exciting as some of these other interior spaces do. So they were like, okay, great. We're going to bring you on. And I had worked within that team for about a month, and then was let go very suddenly as a part of a big layoff of about a dozen or so people. And it was a completely different experience than what I had experienced at a small firm. And a meeting was put on my calendar. It was then moved up the day it was supposed to be. They're like, oh, let's do it in the morning instead. And I was like, okay. And it was my supervisor and her supervisor, who were people I had been in contact with over the summer because, again, I was not a good fit for this studio or maybe even this team, wanted to try something else. I had worked on other smaller healthcare projects that I had really enjoyed. So I was like, maybe I can work with those people instead. Like, I just trying to find my place. And as I'm walking into this meeting, I see the HR representative. I'm like, okay, I'm either in trouble for something. I'm not sure what.
Never a good sign.
Or I'm losing my job. I was like, those are the only two things that would be why HR would be there. And it was the latter. They were laying me off. I have always been very vocal about my work experience in my first layoff. So they knew when they were sitting me down, and they said, they were like, I'm so sorry because I know this just happened to you a year ago. And I really appreciated that human aspect to it. And I also understand that, a company is not a person. A company has to protect itself. And when it protects itself, that means the bottom line in terms of money. Because if they keep everyone on and they run out of money, then the whole company doesn't exist anymore. So the personal experience I had from the principal who did the layoff and the HR manager was as kind and compassionate as I believe the company standards would allow them to be. My supervisor, again, who I had never worked with, sat there and didn't say anything. I think she probably felt really uncomfortable. I'm not sure if it was something she'd ever done before. I don't know. They sat there and they said, this has nothing to do with your performance. Because again, it had been a little bit of a rocky time for the last couple months. And in the back of my mind, I was like, I know it has nothing to do with my performance because the team I'm on now needs me. Like, there was someone who was on the verge of quitting who was like, oh, thank God Julianne's here and can help now. Like, I'm going to stick it out. Like, they had a lot of work. I think maybe I was still in the healthcare staffing pool because, again, it's a big company. I have no idea. But, I started to cry as I did the first time I got laid off. I, believe it's still professional to have a physical response to your emotional experience. And I do not hide that. I cry when I'm happy. I cry when I'm sad. I cry when I'm angry. Like, it's just a part of life. So, I was tearful. There were tissues. But I said, listen, they were like, take all the time you need. I said, I don't need time. Just give me the facts. Like, I already have my unemployment website login. I know how that works. What's my severance? When do my benefits end? And, when can I come get my things? And they were like, you don't have to log back onto your computer today. You can take everything. And I said, well, I'm riding a bicycle, so I can't.
Not everybody drives a car.
Exactly. So I had to borrow a friend's car like a week later to come get my things. And, again, being a big company and getting a lot of like standardized emails, I wasn't sure how the vibe was going to be when I came back in. Because again, like, these were also people I had been friends with for a decade outside of the 1 year we worked together. And again, big company doing a big layoff. I was one of over a dozen people. They didn't notify anyone who the other people were that were getting laid off. Even the people who still worked there, they were not told who was laid off. So I did outreach to the folks that I knew. When I was, packing up my desk that day, I sent myself as many email addresses as I could to connect with the people that I had worked with. And even though they told me not to log back on and do work, I saved the work that I was doing and emailed it to my colleagues because I'm going to hold up my end of the bargain.
Yeah.
And it was work as the only interior designer on the team that I was the only one who had access to that website. I was the only one who knew how to use that software. Like, I needed to send that stuff out. And luckily, when I came back in to get my things, I also had a whole wagon full of, the company's things that I had to bring back because I was very, very heavily involved in their developing professionals group, in their pride group, in their women's group. So I was like, here are all these things that I had purchased that we fundraised for as a part of a fundraiser I was going to do next month. So these things belong to you. And like, I'll send an email to the team to connect them with the nonprofit. I also had a bunch of pom-poms that I had bought to like support our, office softball team and stuff like that. I'm like, this all belongs to you. I was also supposed to do some NCIDQ training for free, even though I own a business that does that. And I emailed those team members and I said, hey, I will uphold my end of the bargain. They have not gotten back to me because I assume the company probably didn't want them to, because conflict of interest type of thing. But I was like, listen, I'll still do it for free because I will uphold my end of the bargain.
Yeah.
This is what I've promised to provide. And even though I'm no longer your coworker, I'm still your colleague. I'm still your friend. And when I went to drop all those things off, they let me, they didn't escort me anywhere. I was able to clear out my locker. And I spent about an hour there just saying goodbye to everyone. Gave the IT guy a big hug. He was really upset because he had lost a bunch of friends in this layoff too. And it's been tough. It was interesting after the fact, texting folks who were like, oh my gosh, I just heard, or thank you for letting me know. I had no idea, things like that. But I also have been tracking LinkedIn to be like, who else got laid off? Because I've been through this before, and I know how, even if they tell you it's not personal, it feels personal. And it feels so scary, especially in an economy where federal funding and tariffs are really messing with our job prospects, whether it's getting a project or getting a job at a firm that is trying to get projects. So, anytime I saw something pop up, I was trying to reach out to people, because when I was laid off the first time, community was everything. Those were the people who helped me get a job. Those were the people who gave me words of affirmation and motivation. And so there was someone else who was laid off who was 1 year out of school. And she was like, this was my first job. I'm not sure, what to do. Do you have any advice? And I said, one, apply for unemployment. Like, a lot of people don't actually understand how to do that, or that you can do that. And she was like, I did, but it says it's under review. And I was like, that's normal. Keep filing. So even just giving that help, was helpful for her.
Yeah.
But then I also, posted on social media about it, because I say social media, I mean like LinkedIn and my professional Instagram, my professional social media. And I was really honest about when it happened the first time, and also when it happened this time, like how it feels so disorienting, because I had been at that company for a year and I was really buying into the brand and the company culture. And our local office really embodied, again, the support, the opportunity, all the reasons I went there. And I think because I didn't figure out, or I didn't find the people at the decision-making level who could be my advocates, I ended up suffering from that. I had one principal encourage me to be a generalist early on. And in hindsight, I think that if I wanted to stay there, that was the wrong advice to follow. But, where I've ended up now, a week after I got laid off, I had a televisit with my therapist, and he's like, you look really good. What's going on? And I said, I'm unemployed. But my community showed up again. So, I was laid off on a Wednesday in the morning, right before lunch, and I sit right next to the open lunch area. So I'm like packing up my desk in tears. One of my friends came over and was like, do you want to do lunch today? And I was like, I can't, because I have to leave because I don't work here anymore. And he was so concerned. I was like, I'll be fine. But, I immediately the next day, I took a day to cry, to relax. I just came home and held my dogs and laid on the porch bench and was just like, I'm going to spend time outside. I'm going to hold my dogs and eat some mac and cheese, and it'll be better. That's my comfort food, mac and cheese. And the next day I started texting and emailing. I was like, letting my coworkers know, hey, I've been let go. And, please, one, let me know of anyone else who has been, because I want to connect with them. And two, if you hear of any opportunities, I'm looking. And one of the people I reached out to was a former professor of mine, Lisa Phillips. She has been an incredible cheerleader, mentor, and colleague my entire career since college. And I reached out to her and I was like, hey, listen, are there any adjunct positions open at the university? And she said, the semester starts on Monday, like in 4 days. So I don't think so, but I'm going to ask for you anyway, because again, she's an incredible, incredible human being. So she reached out, she texted me back, and she said, I'm sorry, there's nothing available. I said, okay, that's fine. So I went back to the job boards and emailing. I really try and again focus on my connections, because especially with AI scraping all of our resumes these days, if you're throwing resumes into a random applicant pool, it's really hard to stand out amongst, again, like AI bots and, things like that. So I was working on that. And then the Monday that the semester started, I got a text message from Lisa. And she said, in a very like Carmen Sandiego kind of way, she was like, if you get a call tomorrow from an unknown number, answer it. And I was like, okay. And I got a text from that unknown number. We set up a call for the following day, and they said, an adjunct professor quit the day before the semester started. Can you start tomorrow? It wasn't even an interview. I've been very involved with my university. I go back and I speak frequently. I sit in on critiques. I've been a representative for open house days. I live in the same city as my university. I've kept in very close touch. And I said, yeah, I can start tomorrow. Can you give me health insurance on September 1st? That was my only bargaining chip. I was like, I don't care how much you pay me. I'm teaching 4 hours a week, and I know that I would qualify for health insurance as an adjunct, but can you start it the day my benefits end? Because when I got laid off, I found out that the company's policy was your benefits end at the end of the month when you get laid off. Mm-hmm. So if I was laid off on the 29th of August, that would have been a much worse situation. Yeah.
I even teach people that whenever they want to put in their 2 weeks, it's go look at your benefits package. Because if you want to take any time off in between, do not put in your notice on the last day of a month if it's going to end at the end of the month, because it's what most policies are. Yeah. It's like, nope, you need to strategically wait until the beginning of the month if you're not going to have coverage, because you also have to know what the new company is going to have in terms of coverage.
And if they're going to make you wait.
Exactly.
Because that was a thing that I didn't realize when I was switching from the small company to the big company. The small company gave me a gracious severance package. 2 months of insurance, full benefits, and pay. That was incredible. It gave me time to breathe. It gave me time to find something. The big company gave me 2 weeks and until the end of the month, which was about 2 weeks. And that was just like, I'd only been there for a year. It's like, okay, fine. I understand. But I also found out that other people were given that same package, which, again, it's a company. It's not a person. They have their rules and they care about their bottom line. But for some of my colleagues who got laid off, it felt just disrespectful.
Yeah. And, they could have been worse and laid you off on the 29th and your benefits end on the 30th. And that would have been a real, well, aren't you a big pain in the butt? I'll say other words off the camera.
So I accepted. I'll get laid off right before lunch and have to parade through the lunchroom to leave the office. I'll take that. But again, the small company, 4:30 on a Friday. They knew I'd be in the office. It was just a lot more intentional, but they were also only laying off one person, so they had the space to do that. If you're a big company and you have to lay off tons of people,
and you got to fill in your calendar with all these little
meetings. It's procedural. It is. And that was a really interesting experience to be able to compare the two, especially because the other one was in very recent memory. So yeah, I started teaching. I got health insurance, and I was like, it does impact my unemployment a little bit, but I have health insurance, because when I got that letter for Cobra, it was almost $1,000 a month. And my unemployment is only about $2,400 a month, I think, because it's $600 a week. So after paying Cobra and paying my mortgage, I'm going to have to start eating the drywall. I don't know. I joked with my IIDA colleagues. I was at an event last night and I was like, I'm here for the free food. Because that's the reality of it, I don't have children. I have 4 fur babies and a bird. And I have a partner who's incredible, and she's a contractor. She works and hustles herself and has been a huge inspiration and a huge support. And, the first time I went through this, I was just kind of like, I've always supported myself. What does this mean? We own a house together and we're not married. I can't get health insurance or anything like that, But when the second time it happened, I was like, I know I have her support, and she's been there through the highs, the lows. She shares in my optimism and believes in me. I'm tearing up talking about it.
You can cry on the podcast. It's fine. If it makes you feel better. I was in a panel discussion earlier this week and I cried through it because of one of the questions. And I'm like, I'm sorry. And trying to pull myself together.
It's real. And that's the thing about, again, being laid off in 2 different scenarios. In the small company, one of the firm partners was crying. She cried with me because we enjoyed working together. But again, the company has to protect their bottom line. And without the company, no one has a job. And, luckily I'm a capable person who has a pretty good network. And, when I landed the teaching gig, I made a post on LinkedIn and I tagged the company that laid me off, because I really enjoyed working there. And I still, believe in the culture that they talk about. I really enjoyed the colleagues that I had to work with. Even the team where it wasn't working out really well, I know some of them as my former professors. I know some of them as colleagues for years. And I still really they're great practitioners. It just wasn't a good fit for me.
Yeah.
And So I tagged the company and I was like, I was let go a week ago. And thanks to my community, thanks to my network, I've got a job teaching. And again, adjuncts make nothing, next to nothing. But when I look at the health insurance and what they're contributing to that, it makes it worth it. And also the students make it worth it. They are so fun. I'm teaching building technology for architecture and interior design. It was my most hated class 15 years ago. And I said that that was what they had. So I jumped at the chance to teach anything. But the faculty member, the tenured faculty member who's coordinating all the different adjuncts for this section, I was honest with him and I said, I hated this class. I said, I'm going to try and make it as fun as possible, which the feedback from the students so far has been that. They're like, thank you for making it fun. And I'm like, I wouldn't be able to teach it otherwise. But, I made this post on LinkedIn and as of right now, it has over 500 likes, which I have a decent LinkedIn network because it's my favorite social media as a designer. It's a little bit like Instagram, but also a little bit like Twitter and Facebook. It's a lot of fun. And the design community is great. So I made that post. And then all of a sudden I had people from across the country who were also getting laid off from this exact same big company reaching out to me and saying like, do you have any advice? Like, what do I do? I feel so dejected. I've never lost a job before. I worked there for years. Or some of them were like, I've been laid off for 6 months. Like, how did you do it? And I'm like, one, yes, I, have a job, but I'm making $200 a week pre-tax. Like I'm not making my ends meet. I'm going to be hustling to do that. Which I always knew I knew how to do that. I'm like, if I gotta, borrow a car and drive for Uber, I can figure it out. I just need health insurance.
Yeah.
It's America,
it's
baby.
One step.
Yeah. So I've been reaching out, trying to be in community with these people, even if I don't know them, because that's what's helped me. Companies are not people. They cannot be empathetic. If you are an LLC, if you're an S Corp, you cannot be empathetic because you are just on paper. It's the people that matter. And that's where if you reach out to me, whether you have advice about being, or looking for advice about being laid off, if you're looking for help with your exam prep for the NCIDQ, I make myself available because so many people have done that for me and still do that for me. So it has been a roller coaster for the last year and a half. And the one thing I want to tie a ribbon in this long story is that it was last week or the week before I got an email. I was having a rough day. Again, I'm still feeling a little disoriented and I'm trying to realign my identity because I identify as an interior designer. I'm an architect in training. I'm an educator. I'm a leader. But I also identified as an employee of this company. And I had done that twice now. And I have been working to bring other people wealth in 2 different companies now. And both times, it just didn't work out financially for them. I'm not just a team player, I'm a team builder. And team building isn't always billable work.
Yeah.
So it's, the kind of thing like that provides value to your employees so then they can build better projects. But again, it's not always the billable work. So I was having a rough day, just sort of woke up on the wrong side of the bed, probably because the dog stole my side of the bed. He likes to do that sometimes. And I got an email from my university. And I, now that I'm teaching there, I have all these trainings I have to do and there's new tax forms and all that stuff. But this email wasn't that. And this isn't something I've even shared with you yet, but they are awarding me with the 2025 Young Alumni Award. And they invited me to come to an awards breakfast. This is the last year that I would qualify as a young alumni because I'm 10 years post-graduation. I have applied for this award probably 6 to 8 times. I did not apply this year. Someone nominated me. I did not apply. And they sent me this and they said, this is the day of the awards breakfast. You can, send me your guest list, as many people as you want, and we would love to have you. And the university that I went to, Philadelphia University, now Jefferson, it was acquired by Jefferson. There's a huge medical college that has incredible doctors and physician's assistants and surgeons that come out of it. There's our College of Architecture. There's a really good business school. The fashion and textile design students and the work that they go on to do is incredible. And I'm over here. I'm technically unemployed. And I'm going to go accept this award next weekend. And I just I couldn't believe it. I'm starting to tear up again. Like, it has just been such a roller coaster.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the analogy of a roller coaster is really good. There will be ups, there will be downs, but it keeps going.
Yeah.
And I'm determined to stay in this profession. I love it so much. And, you know, I've seen the casualties of time periods like 2008 and 2020. And, you know, I have so many colleagues and friends who have gone into UX or graphic design, who have become wedding photographers, who have done branding, like all these other things. And, you know, what I love is design, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's architecture, whether it's interiors, whether it's teaching it. And I've spent literally my entire life immersing myself in this profession because my mom discovered what architecture was when I was in grade school. And I started touring colleges when I was in middle school just to understand what this is. And also because my mom's just as precocious as I am. And, you know, I look at me receiving this award against, again, doctors. Like, it just blows my mind that I'm going to walk up on stage and say, I'm unemployed. And I won this award. And let me tell you, I have invited so many people on that guest list. If you were in Philadelphia, you'd be coming too. And I've invited my past professors, people who don't work at the university anymore. I invited my friends and family. And I've also reached out to some of my colleagues, including the ones who worked at the firms where I no longer work, because the people is what matters.
Mm-hmm.
You can love a job, but what you love about that job and the work that you do is all the people around it.
Yeah.
It's not the entity that is on paper. The company only cares about their bottom line. That's just what they're designed to do. As companies, you are designed to make money. And that's that's what I've been doing for the last year and a half. Is a lot of crying, a lot of cheers of joy, and a lot of one foot in front of the other.
Mm-hmm.
One of my former professors, Tommy Fung, who was actually a business professor that I had in undergrad. I made my own minor in entrepreneurship because I knew that, you know, I might end up owning my own business someday. So I wanted to do that. And the business minor just didn't align. And I had him for a seminar class in which I got to make my own business plan and create a business. And I've kept in touch with him. He teaches at a different university now. We get lunch every so often. And he had a hip replacement surgery this summer. And, you know, we've just been in touch, keeping updated. And I told him, I said, you know, through the last month, the last layoff, and getting this new job and everything, I said, I'm just putting one foot in front of the other, just like you are. And, you know, this is, you know, not business advice he gave me. It's not a career opportunity. It was just seeing him also go through something where it's like, you know, we all have our own journey and we all just have to put one foot in front of the other. And as long as you keep heading in the direction you want and you're surrounded by good people by community and maintaining that culture of connectivity, that's what matters.
Yeah.
And I'll pause to give you a chance to speak.
No, you're fine. Because I have personally never gone through a layoff. I have experienced being around other people that get laid off. And I've been in a small firm that, you know, didn't do layoffs the most ethically, I would think. But I've been in a large firm that have laid off and furloughed people. And it's very much that back-to-back meeting. And
yeah,
at a large firm, you don't know when people get let go or if people leave. In a small firm, it's very obvious. And I remember having happy hours when people would move on to another opportunity.
Yeah.
And at a large firm, you're like, oh, this person left a couple weeks ago. Like,
or there's so many people that, like, that was one of the big adjustments I had. Like, the small firm had a very high retention rate.
mm-hmm.
The people who owned the company had been working there since it was their first job and they took it over. Like, it was very good place to work. Being at a big company, people quit, people get fired, people get laid off, and it's just so hard to keep track of. Even just within my own office of 200 people, or my business center, which was across 3 states, like, it was a lot.
Yeah. And even when I was in college, like the 2008 recession was still going on, and me finding my first job, it wasn't like I had a pool of jobs. It was, hey, I got one offer and I'm taking it.
Yeah.
And I did a little bit more expertise in healthcare in college because I'm like, that's job security, because that's all people talked about, and that being an option. And then you come out and they're like, oh, government work is also great job security. It will always be there. And it's like, there is no perfect job security project
If
typology.
anyone says always, anyone who says always, it's wrong.
Yeah.
My
You never
father
know
was
what's
a
going to get
government.
hit.
Yeah. My father was an engineer for the government. He got a pension, all of that. His father worked at Westinghouse, which, used to make appliances and things way back in the day, and got a pension from that. And, my father's generation, boomers, there aren't that many companies that offer pensions, but he still figured it out. For me, I'm like, the government is not a sure deal.
Nope.
I joke, coming from a family of engineers, that I'm a spatial engineer, not a outer space engineer, a spatial engineer. But yeah, I thought healthcare would be job security. And that was, I think, I can only guess, that's where a lot of the other folks who were laid off came from. And I just think, again, with like federal funding and also maybe with the choices our firm is making, it is what it is.
You never want to have too many eggs in one basket, which is probably what more that first firm hit. But then, like,
they had their specialty.
Yeah, I just saw people get laid off last week at a local firm in Pittsburgh, and it was because VA work slowed down. It's like the government is slowing down all of their work. So if you don't have something major that's proceeding, or I was working on a VA project, and on the client side, people were getting laid off, and you're like, what do I do? Like, they made these comments. Do I have to pick up their comments now, or does that not matter? How do we track this? So you can't just assume any one typology is going to be your safe house, because everybody always asks me, like, how do I protect my career? How do I not be expendable and like be potentially laid off? And I'm like, from a firm, you said it very well. A company is not a human. They have to look at the finances, and sometimes it sucks. And you have to see where you have to save money. And sometimes it's hey, you're the highest paid interior designer, and by letting go of one of you, I don't have to let go of two other people. Or hey, the client canceled all their work, and so hey, we have to let everybody go from that client because that is what financially makes sense. And so you can't take that as anything that's personal. But if you really want job security in the AEC industry, I highly think it's one thing and one thing only, and it's your own relationships and network. And
100%.
that's what's going to save you, which is what I loved hearing from your stories on going through your layoffs, because, you're still in the process of finding that new home that you can really like grab a hold of and stay with.
Or even making that home for myself.
Exactly.
Because another way of not getting laid off is just doing your own thing. I had in Philly, the International Interior Design Association has an event every year called Product Parade. It's a big expo. I used to plan it a decade ago. And it was last night, and it was the first industry event I had been to where I was seeing people since I got laid off. And the first couple interactions were tough. People are like, how are you doing?
Yeah.
And because a lot of people are getting laid off and a lot of people aren't doing well, or they don't have the innate optimism that I wake up with every day. My mother says I've just always been this way. Thank goodness. But by the end of it, I was, sharing with people. I'm like, hey, I'm doing great. I'm teaching. Could you come in and talk to my students? Or, I'm looking for, work that I can still contribute to my architecture hours. If you know anyone who needs drafting or rendering help, let me know. How do I create a home for myself if it's not at a company? And it doesn't mean that I'm never going to work at a company. It doesn't mean that I don't want to. It just means that now I've been burned twice. I need to put some aloe on my burn. And I also just need to like really think through my options. And the option could also be me.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? Through the work that I do with NCIDQ stuff, I talk to designers from all over the country and a few that are all over the world. And everyone has their highs and lows, and community and relying on yourself, believing in yourself. I was fortunate enough that I got that first layoff after having 9 incredible years at that company, where I was just every single day, they were building me up, whether that be emotionally, whether that be skill building. Like, they gave me so many opportunities, and that has given me so much confidence. Like, I know I'm capable because they've told me and I've proven it. And I have to remember that when I go into a room. When I'm going in for an interview, you're not just interviewing me, I'm interviewing you too.
Exactly.
And I want to make sure, like, do I want to sign on to this company?
Yeah. And it is really hard for like the young professional that had reached out to you that's like not even a year out of school. Like, that's tough because you don't have that experience behind you to be able to have that network already and build that up. So layoffs aren't easy, by any means.
No.
Even if you've got a great network, 2008, there weren't jobs anywhere, regardless how good of a network you have.
Yeah.
And so you just hope if you get laid off, it's in one of these weird moments where it's like firms are either like slammed busy or slow. And so there's options. But I did want to also hit on your Design Success Network. And so what got you inspired to start that, and what are you doing over there?
So the NCIDQ exam, which is a certification exam for interior designers, I'll just give a brief intro to that because it's a little misunderstood. When it comes to architecture, every state has clear set regulations that have been in place, and you go to school, you collect your hours, you pass your exams. With the NCIDQ and the fact that interior design is a younger profession that is predominantly led by women, we're still working on getting our foothold in terms of recognition and legislation. So the NCIDQ within the industry is pretty well understood. There are still pockets or sectors where, folks might not understand the value of the credential, but a lot of GSA jobs will require the interior designer on the project to have their NCIDQ. There are states now, Texas and Florida being two of them, where if you register with the state, you can sign and seal permit drawings, not to build a whole building, but just to do what we are qualified to do as interior designers. My state of Pennsylvania, just a year ago, signed legislation into law to have a Title Act. So a Title Act is where now with my credentials, I can register with the state and call myself a specific title. There's also a different kind of legislation called a Practice Act, and that's where you cannot perform or practice certain tasks without having these credentials and registering with the state. And then in addition to that, you can have permitting privileges. So every state is a little different, and because of that, the NCIDQ doesn't necessarily get the same level of support and recognition as it deserves. It was something that my university heavily pushed. It was also something that, again, coming from initially looking at architecture school, I looked into what does an interior designer need to do to get licensed, which now I know is certification, registration. It depends on the legalese in the state in which you live or practice. So I knew I wanted to take my NCIDQ. I ended up waiting longer than I needed to. I collected like triple the amount of work experience I needed just because I was very involved with the International Interior Design Association at the time. But when I stepped into chapter president, I was like, I got to pass this exam. So I'm going to start an IIDA study group and, fundraised for that, got a bunch of other people to study with me. And I said, at this point, I was like, I am more than 5 years out of school and I just need to rip off the Band-Aid. I'm going to take all the sections of the exam at the same time. The AREs are a little different than the NCIDQ in that the NCIDQ is only offered twice a year. You can only take the exams in April and October. So you only have a limited number of opportunities because we also still have a rolling clock, 5 years, which means 10 test taking opportunities to pass 3 exams. It's a little different if you apply as a student, but in my situation with all my work experience, I had 5 years to pass 3 exams. And I said, the work experience that I had was very practical and it was across every single design phase. So I said, I'm going to study. I'm going to work with this study group and I'm just going to take all 3 tests. Let's rip off the Band-Aid and let's just see what happens. Worst case scenario, if I don't pass an exam, I've gained experience and in 6 months I can retake it. I spaced out my 3 exams every Friday morning because then I had a full week of work and being in my design brain mode. And then also I'm a morning person. So 8 a.m. on a Friday, like I'm ready to go without coffee. So that was my plan. The first 2 exams, you get a preliminary score report that gives you, an indication
passed.
if you,
yeah.
And the last one, you don't find out until all the official score reports are out, which is 6 to 8 weeks after the end of the testing month. So like around the holidays in December. First 2 preliminary score reports, I went to the park after I took the test in the testing center. And I was just like breathing. I was on the phone with my mom and I opened it up and I passed. And the second one I passed. And then when I got the final results in December, somehow I had passed all 3. It is possible, but I tell all of my students, don't do it. It was very mentally difficult. Again, I have a partner who supports me to the end of the earth. She did extra dog walks, cooking, dishes, laundry, like all of the other logistical things. She understood that I just wouldn't have time to do them because I needed to study every single night because I was putting myself through this. So then after I did that, I immediately signed up to be an exam ambassador. So those are volunteers. My name and email is on the website, that if people in my area or anywhere need someone to talk to about the exam, instead of reaching out to the company, the organization that creates the exam, they can reach out to us. So I started doing that. And then on LinkedIn, I saw a job post for a remote teaching position for NCIDQ instruction. And I threw my resume in the ring because I thought it would be fun. And also, by teaching the NCIDQ, I'm just further cementing the knowledge in my own brain. So it's kind of like I'm getting paid for continuing professional development for myself.
Yeah.
I saw it as a win-win.
I always learn better when I have to teach it.
Yes.
And so it's one thing to figure it out for yourself, but if you need to be able to explain it to somebody that hasn't seen it before, then that just, it ingrains it into how you work and your memory.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did that for one exam season, and then, and then the woman who owned that company ended it. The woman who owned that company closed it. Excuse me. The owner of the company chose to close the company, chose to sunset, her work with NCIDQ education. She had been doing it for a number of years as a volunteer and then trying to own her own company. And it's a lot. It's a lot of work in addition to working full-time as a designer. So when she chose to end the company, I even offered to her, I was like, there's still through the month of October when these people are taking their tests, I'm still willing to email them for free. You don't have to pay me. I just want to see it through. And I realized in saying that, the passion that I had for helping these people get this certification, because not only does it mean a lot for us professionally, but for our industry and the recognition that we are trying to get, that we deserve, the more people that we have who are NCIDQ certified, the larger body we have to be able to say, hey, I'm here, I'm qualified, and I want to be able to get recognized for the work that I do. So it was literally that October that I formed my own LLC. I had to figure that out. And I decided I was going to start my own business. And the initial model was providing tutoring services. And I was doing all of this on the side of having, a full-time job, but I just started tutoring people on the NCIDQ. I said, you can pay, sliding scale to meet with me for an hour, send me your questions ahead of time, and I will give you personal help. Within the world of NCIDQ exam prep, there is one large player in terms of prep providers. And that was the company that I had used. It was very robust. They have excellent practice quizzes, but it was really hard to get in touch with someone on a personal level. The online forum discussion board they had was quite overwhelming. It had a lot of rules in you have to ask questions in certain ways. And I was very overwhelmed by it. And a lot of my colleagues have been too. So I thought, I'm going to try and fill a niche here and just be myself and get to network and make new friends across the country and also help people with their exams. So I did that for a couple months. And then after the April exams, I said, okay, I'm going to hire tutors. I'll let them set their own rates. So that way they're getting paid what they deserve. I'll add a tiny fraction for a margin on top. And I'm going to grow this network, Design Success Network. So then I've been doing that for the last 2 years, and it's been great. I have some tutors who are just incredible. Some of them meet with students once a week because these students just want that kind of help. Depending on your work experience, there might be certain parts that are on the exam that you haven't had a good opportunity to work with yet.
Yeah.
And then there's also the fact that you're studying for a standardized test, and not everything might be the same way that you do it for work. It might not be the same way you learned it in school. It might not even be what a local building code official tells you, because building code is interpreted. So we have to learn things the standard way for the test. So I did that. I then started adding on classes. What would it feel like if I taught a Zoom class with 20 people? And then I began doing some volunteer work with IIDA, International Interior Design Association, at the national level. I had been very involved locally, and they were going to do just a 101 webinar to learn about the exam. So I did that with them. There was an overwhelming amount of attendance. You have to remember that a lot of the people who work at these professional associations in the headquarters, they are people who have careers in associations, not necessarily in the profession. So they knew what the NCIDQ was, but this was kind of a good barometer for them of oh, there's a lot of need here and there's a lot that people want. So I emailed them and I said, you should hire me. Like, I've given so much to this organization as a volunteer, as a leader for the last decade, or more than that at this point. And I would love to provide this for your members. So I wrote up a proposal. I had to write my very first teaching philosophy statement, and it all went to Cheryl Durst, who is the head at IIDA, and they've brought me on, and now I've been with them for 3 exam seasons. We're wrapping up our last class this weekend, and it's incredible to like be in a virtual room with 30 or more designers who, some of them, maybe they don't have other interior designers at their firm. Maybe it's an architecture firm and they're the only one. Or maybe they're in a really rural area and they can't get to an in-person study group. Or maybe they're not a member of IIDA, but they can afford the non-member price to come to my class. I try to do everything very sliding scale or a la carte, because maybe there are things and you don't need to study. So why should you have to pay for that?
Yeah.
I want to make things affordable and accessible. And a part of that is making myself accessible. So my email inbox is always open. I say if I don't, hear questions from current exam candidates, I'm not going to know how to help. So even if you don't come to my business and, partake in our services, I still want to hear from you and I still want to support you. I want to keep in touch. I want to know how you're doing. I want to know, do you pass? What are you struggling with? And my tutoring network has grown to include folks who, help people come up with a study schedule. I have folks who come to me and they're like, I'm a mom. I'm really struggling to find time to study. And I'm like, okay, you should meet with Marcia, because Marcia studied for the exam as a mother who owns her own business, and she will understand what you need better than I can.
Yeah. Because it's not until you go through certain things, like even myself as a new mom, like I get questions when I show up to events. How are you doing? Like the same thing you get with laid off. Like, wasn't a bad thing. Like, sure, I probably didn't sleep last night, but who cares?
Yeah.
But until you live it, like I took an exam when I had a puppy, and that was already hard enough that trying to study, like I'm working on my passive house, and trying to do passive house while having a newborn was not the best idea. And
and you have your own business and you're working in a firm, like
so much, but it's like I'm always trying to improve myself, but I've already had to push that exam down the line once. So I'm like, hopefully I can do it. But until you live it, it's like, oh, okay. So when you can connect with those mentors and teachers that have those same similar experiences, they can provide you with better advice.
Yeah. And one of the other things, again, with like making it personal, is I've had folks come to me on Zoom and, either I've talked to people who have just immigrated to this country and they're like, I have 20 years of experience, but I need someone to verify that, because in my country, no one had this certification, so they can't sign off on my hours. And with how the NCIDQ works, I'm able to do that. It's different than the AXP hours in that way. But I've also met with people who are like, I've used those other resources and I still feel so lost and I failed my exam. What do I do? And they're also tearful on Zoom. And I hold space for that, because I'm like, your experience is valid. I hire tutors who have had to take their exams more than once, because that doesn't mean that you are not capable as a designer, as an educator, as a colleague. Like, it's a standardized test.
Yeah. And it's hard because you only get what the math was out for, like 10 opportunities to
10
do
opportunities
it. And
for 3 exams.
When you said that, I think through the ARE stories that I gathered, and there are some professionals that failed 10, 12, 14 exams, but we can at least take it any time of the year. But like, if you only have 10 opportunities to take it before a rolling clock would kick it off and you'd have to do them over again.
And there are some people who just aren't good test takers. Like, these questions, some of them are designed to trick you. You have to learn how to read the question. It's kind of like taking the SATs after high school. It's the same kind of thing. And I happen to be a person who's a pretty good test taker. I can read a question and quickly interpret what it is they want, not necessarily what they're saying. So I'm trying to pass that along. The NCIDQ exam gets updated every 5 years, and the next update is going into effect this winter. So since I have 40 more hours in my week, as of recently, I'm going to be creating a lot more content, and my plan is I'm going to have workbooks. I'm going to have some video lessons. I want to really create this network of support for designers who are passing this exam. And then maybe in the future, I expand it to career coaching. I expanded to portfolio reviews. Like I have had folks who book time with the tutors to do interview prep because they've just created a relationship with the tutor that is so strong that they're like, I have this interview, I'm nervous, I trust you and I look up to you. Like, can you help me with this? So I'm like, yeah, that's another part of design success. Like I gave the company a sort of abstract name so that way it can ebb and flow with, what I want to provide our community and what our community needs.
Yeah.
Especially as I become an architect too, like how can I also support architects, maybe architects who want to become interior designers. There is an entire pathway specifically if you have an architecture degree. In order to be eligible for the NCIDQ exam, there is a pathway for that. It is spelled out on the website, which is a lot different than the AREs when I started looking into it. I have some interior design colleagues who have gotten licensed through other states where you don't have to have the degree, but you have to have a ton of hours, things like that. I'm going a little bit more in the traditional route with my education there. But, the NCIDQ is a powerful tool for us as individuals, for our clients, for the market, and for our industry to grow. It is that important that I have just decided to talk about it every single day to at least one person, whether it's someone who's taking it, whether it's someone like you who is curious about it, or whether it's just the wider community at large. Every firm that I've worked at, I've supported my colleagues who were going through the exams. And, I've done the same thing through IIDA. I go to speak at universities. I've even written some curriculum for college classes that involve NCIDQ exam prep. And, it's just like how the architects need to get prepared for architecture, interior designers need the same thing. And in our professions, your education never stops. You are always going to be learning things, and that includes up and through your exams.
Yeah, definitely. And I always like wrapping up my podcast with this final question. We've hit so much in this episode in your experience, so it may be hard, but I always like asking, what advice do you have for young professionals just starting their careers?
Absolutely. I know I've said this already, probably every other sentence today, but community, like find people. A lot of students, fresh grads, young professionals approach networking as, can you hire me? Can I get a job? Do you know someone who's hiring? Can I get a job? Where think about it more as establishing friendships, where it's like, what are you interested in? What are you interested in? What can I help you with? And by building that, someone's going to remember you and be like, oh, Julianne volunteered for all those IIDA events. She was so nice. I'm going to recommend her for this. I have people like right now still sending me job like postings on LinkedIn just because they see it and they think of me because I'm active on LinkedIn and because I'm a friend. And coming out of college, keep in touch with your classmates, keep in touch with your coworkers, your colleagues, your sales reps, even, all of us as people, in order to enjoy our working life, we need to be good people to one another. So making those connections, making those friendships, which is really what networking is, it's making professional friendships. That's the best advice I can give, because every step along the way, whether it was a high or a low on my roller coaster, there were always friends on the roller coaster with me, all with our hands up screaming.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's all about people. It is all about people, because even keep in touch with your clients too, because those projects, you might lead to another project. That client might end up working somewhere else and recommend you for a job there. Like, you never know. It is all about the people. Without people, there is no good design.
Yeah.
It's all about people.
And you could always end up on the owner's side. You never know.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I hear there's a lot of stability there right now, but people say a lot of things.
Yeah. Don't trust anything anybody says.
No.
And if anybody wants to get a hold of you, find you, get in touch with the Design Success Network, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so my Instagram, my LinkedIn, my email address, everything is Julianne J. Peters. Finding me on Instagram, finding me on LinkedIn, I am on there quite a bit. And all of those also include my links for Design Success Network. Like I said, coming in the end of this year, early 2026, Design Success Network is going to have a much more robust offering of classes and exam prep resources, all affordable and accessible. So keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, and I'll be sure to repost this episode too whenever you do your full launch on the new courses.
Thank you.
So, but I'll also have links down below. So it makes it real easy for anybody to find you and get a hold of you. And so I wanted to thank you, Julianne, for taking the time to speak with me, being so honest and upfront with your layoff experiences and just being able to help others. That's where I love talking to you every time.
Yeah, I knew we were going to run over today because we just have a good time.
Naturally. Sorry for the long episode for anybody who's made it to the end.
I'm sure they're enjoying it too.
I hope you enjoyed our discussion today. Learn some advice to take with you and see how our industry is all tied together to create the world around us. Check out the description below for any links or resources we discussed. If you liked the episode, please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. Give me a thumbs up and leave a comment below. It really helps others be able to discover this resource and support finding that career path that best works for them. If you know someone that has inspired your own career that you'd like me to interview, let me know in the comments below, or you can reach out to me via my website or LinkedIn. I'd be happy to share their story or your own. Thank you again, and I cannot wait for the next career story I get to share with you next week.